Hey, I'm Chris. I live in Las Vegas, and I'm an ex-evangelical worship leader. And this is my deconstruction story revisited. So, a lot of things have happened in the last year, and about a year ago, a little bit over a year ago, I shared my deconstruction story. Now, my deconstruction story is not new. I had found that my faith was deconstructing for the last several decades, but didn't have a name for it, and I didn't know how to address it, and I really didn't hear anybody else's stories to know that what was happening to me is actually very common and is not just a trend in evangelical church nowadays. It's actually becoming very common. So, a year ago, I shared my story about what it was like to be an evangelical Christian in the 1990s and the early 2000s, and how I became a worship leader at that time, and all the experiences that happened to me in my youth group and later as a young adult at my church. Now, and in no way is this an attack on the Christian religion, and in no way is this an attack on my old church, Meadows Fellowship. I haven't attended that church in 25, 30 years. I have no idea what their teachings are nowadays. So as far as I know, they are probably not doing the same teachings they were doing years ago. So going back to my deconstruction story a year ago, a lot has changed, and I'm happy to update and tell you a couple of things that have happened within the last year in my life. So when I shared my deconstruction story a year ago, I was a pizza delivery guy, and we were just coming off of COVID. Now, I'm a trained medical technician, so I was very happy during COVID to take time out of the medical field and just be a regular, normal guy. It's funny because I did not plan on there being a pandemic. As a pizza delivery guy, when COVID hit, suddenly I was an essential worker, and delivering food to people was one of those jobs that was not cut in society. I was later inspired by COVID to get back into the medical field, and now currently I am a medical diagnostic technician, but I'm also an HIV counselor and tester at one of the largest HIV sexual health clinics in Las Vegas. So you can understand that my emphasis on medical health and education and basically everyday citizens taking care of their own by staying healthy and knowing their status is very important to me. Especially now, I was very inspired during COVID to come back into the medical field. Now, a lot of things during COVID had really influenced me to share my deconstruction story. Now, going back to my first deconstruction story a year ago, I had shared how I was a born-again Christian in the 1990s and how I was an on-fire Christian, and so was my youth group. I had noticed little things in church, little things that would bother me, but I would let them go because that's what you do when you love people. I would notice little things like hypocrisy. I would notice gossiping. I would notice being judgmental towards people who are non-Christian. These are all normal things that happen in every church. This is not me picking on evangelical Christianity in and of itself. I really just think that that's just normal human nature, that there is us and there is them, and human beings love to point fingers. So that is not exclusive to religion, but these are some of the things that I noticed while I was still a member of church that bothered me. So later, after I left evangelical church, I had done even more research into the Bible itself, not just the surface text like I did as a believer, but I looked into the historical accuracy of the Bible, and also looked into who wrote the Bible and what was their intent. What was the message they were trying to teach the people of their time? A lot of it was inspirational. A lot of it was the Hebrew people going through hard times, and the writers of the Bible at that time trying to give them inspiration, like these hard times will end. Our God will come back and pull us out of this hard time. That's a lot of what the Bible is. And also, when it comes to the Old Testament, the writers of the Hebrew Bible were trying to give the Hebrew people history, an origin story, trying to give them an identity. And I've got no problem with that. If you're a fan of history, archaeology, anthropology, if you've studied how civilizations talk about their own origin story, they're all pretty much the same. Each and every civilization throughout history will write an origin story saying, these are our people, these are where we came from. Usually it starts with the creation story. Usually that part of the region of the world is the navel of the world, or is where all life began to spring up. And the Hebrew story of Adam and Eve is no different. Now, it's funny because a lot of evangelical Christians, they take the Bible as literal. I used to as well, but I've also always been a lover of science, and I did believe in evolution, even as a teenager and even as an on-fire Christian. I just believed that God had made evolution happen. So I always thought that Adam and Eve may have been some sort of allegorical thing, talking about how human beings at the dawn of time, had switched from being hunter-gatherers to civilization itself, to agriculture and pharmacology and all of that stuff. So that's who I was as an evangelical Christian. As I studied the Bible more, as I went into where the origins of it came from, it was very clear to me that the prophecy in the Bible has nothing to do with who we are in modern times. That the prophecy in the Bible was very much teachings for the people of their time, and it was understood to be that way, at least to the readers or the people who lived in the Bible of that time, that those scriptures were meant for them, not for us. And it's very weird how modern day believers use projection in order to say that these old scriptures, these old meanings of things, have everything to do with the modern times we live in. They do not. The funny thing about Hebrews of the late Bronze Age and Christians of the Iron Age is they know nothing about science and medicine and anything that we are doing nowadays. They didn't even know how the weather was created. They didn't understand how the seasons were controlled not by gods and deities, but the seasons are controlled by the rotation of the earth. They did not get this. A lot of Bronze Age Hebrews, if you read the Old Testament, they were very flat earth. They believed in the same cosmology of the ancient Egyptians and Mesopotamians and Babylonians, that the earth was flat and that the orbs in the sky flowed around us, and that controlled day and night. You have to understand that these ancient people, they worked with what they had. And if you listen to the Bible and to the different commentaries of the Bible and the different ways people saw their God, their Hebrew God, you could see that it was very, very human, that the Bible isn't inspired by God, that they were recreating a deity that they felt that they could express themselves in or see themselves in. If you look at the different accounts of the Old Testament, you will see that the Hebrew God Yahweh changes form. He's able to be seen by some people. He shows up on the battlefield for some people. Sometimes he's a mist in the garden for Adam and Eve. Sometimes he cannot be seen by human eyes or you will die, like with Moses. And then yet he shows up to kill Moses in another story, until Moses' wife circumcises their child and puts the child's foreskin on his feet. But I believe the original Hebrew, that foreskin did not go on Moses' feet, by the way. It went on his foreskin, which is odd that he would have to circumcise his kid in order for the Spirit of God to not kill Moses. If the Hebrew God was all-knowing and all-seeing and knew the future, why would he be condoning slavery? Why would he condone genocide? If he knew what would happen in the future, if he knew that eventually society would come to a point to where we knew that slavery and genocide was wrong. Now, that's the big argument, that maybe the God of the Bible, if it was real, maybe isn't as moral as people would like to think in the Christian church. I wrestled with all of these after my faith fell away. More than that, though, I wrestled with the idea that a lot of evangelicals have put themselves and backed themselves politically behind such leaders that are not Christian whatsoever and don't even hold up to the standards of modern day Christianity. If you were ever an evangelical Christian, you will understand that there's some sort of high moral code for their side. And if you don't live up to that moral code, then they see you down here if not lower. So what really weirded me out to see some of my best friends from youth group, and I'm still friends with some of them nowadays online. We don't hang out anymore because of my political views have changed. I am no longer a right-wing evangelical, and I do not vote that way, and I'm very much into equality and equal representation in society. It's not very popular ideas in modern day Christianity, which is a shame, because had they read their Bible, they'd understand that maybe treating others with respect, just like the Samaritan, might be a better way to go than judging your fellow man and ostracizing them and calling them sinners. So, Donald Trump. The insurrection was a big deal to me when it came down to sharing my deconstruction story, because I had seen friends exhaustively try to stand up for Donald Trump and try to make excuses for his behavior. It must be exhausting to be an evangelical Christian nowadays and have to make excuses for that man. And aren't you just a little bit tired? Aren't you just a little bit exhausted for standing up for Donald Trump? So the man is now twice impeached, twice indicted, and guilty of sexual assault. Again, exhausting trying to stand up for that man and trying to work your Bible into believing that this person is somehow the representative of God and that he is there for the evangelicals. To me, it just proves that evangelical faith believers will believe almost any lie that is told to them, and they are that naive and they cannot do their own research. Again, when I was a Bible-believing Christian, I know the Bible quite well. I know those stories quite well. I've read the Bible from cover to cover a lot. And I even know how to scribe in Hebrew. How many middle-aged guys in 21st century America know how to scribe in Hebrew? It's honestly a very useless skill. I wish I hadn't wasted my time learning how to do such. But honestly, I'm an artist. I know how to do really, really beautiful calligraphy. Scribing is really like cake. If you've ever been in an art class, you could learn how to scribe in any language. Donald Trump and the hypocrisy of modern day Christians. This man is a nightmare, and yet they still are blindly devoted to him. And to me, that causes so much pause, and that makes me very, very worried, because my Christian friends that I still love from youth group 20, 30 years ago, they are in love with this dude. And honestly, not all of my evangelical friends like Trump. A lot of them, like I'd say 50-50. Half of my evangelical friends love Trump. The other half saw right through his bullshit from the start. And that warms my little heart that you could still believe in Jesus, and then you could still see that Trump is evil. So that warms my little heart. So I told you how last year I was a pizza delivery guy, but I used to work in diagnostic medicine. COVID-19, it inspired me to get back into diagnostic medicine. So now I'm a tester at a clinic and a counselor. What really gets me with this year is there's a lot of wacky things happened. I shared a story in my deconstruction story how a beautiful young woman from my church fell off of a mountain, and I really just didn't like how my church handled the situation. Her and her husband were having problems in their marriage, and a lot of us kind of knew about it, and yet she mysteriously falls off of a mountain while they're out like mountain climbing one day. Now, again, I didn't start to have suspicions about the girl falling off of the mountain until years later, and now it's like 20 years later, and it's all way back in the past. But have you ever seen somebody in the supermarket that you know from a long time ago, and then you're like, oh, I know that person, and then you're like, oh, I don't want to talk to that person because I know them. Let me go down the next aisle. Well, 3 months ago, in the supermarket, I ran into that girl's mom and her sister, and I used to date her sister when I was a teenager, so I know them like, you know what I mean? Somebody you knew a long, long time ago. As soon as you make eye contact, you immediately know them. So I see her mom and I see her sister, and immediately in like 10 seconds, I made that decision. Do I really want to catch up with them and tell them what's going on in my life? Or should I just let it go and walk away? And I chose, some would say like the pussy position, that I walked away, or I ran away like a coward. But honestly, this is why I didn't stop to say hello to them in the supermarket, even though they were really good friends of mine 30 years ago. I had come to the idea that now maybe their daughter, their sister, was maybe thrown off of that mountain, man, when she was having troubles with her husband. That is a horrifying conclusion, and there's no way I would share that with them, talking to them in the supermarket, that maybe their loss was a homicide and not an accident, as well as I'm not an evangelical Christian anymore. What kind of message of hope, of telling them what was going on in my life, could I give them? What could I say? Could I say, oh, hi, we used to know each other from church. I no longer believe what you believe, and I believe that evangelical Christianity can be a poisonous lie and is dangerous. That would have done nothing for them. That probably would have hurt their feelings or broken their heart. Maybe there's a possibility that they no longer believe in that faith anymore either. But honestly, they were so deeply entrenched in their faith, and having lost a daughter, I could see them embrace their faith all the more. So I wasn't about to do that. So the whole idea of me catching up with old friends from church and having a conversation that would probably just like take away their hope, or make them feel sadder, or bring up old feelings that they probably, and trauma that they don't want to go through again, I decided that maybe it was just better to go down the next aisle and just wish them well. But yeah, I ran into the family of the nice girl who fell off of a mountain. And one of the reasons that I just don't trust that church that I used to go to. I think I told you stories about how there was a Christmas sermon where they claimed to have a baby that was left at the foot of the church, at the front doors of the church, before you walk into the lobby. They were doing like the whole Jesus Christmas story, and they were like, hey, we found this baby at the front of the church. And then everybody was like, ooh, ah, everybody prayed together. It was very emotional. And then at the very end of the sermon, he was like, no, we didn't find this baby at the end of the church. This is somebody's baby who like goes to this church. And I was just trying to teach you a lesson. Again, the drama, the heartstrings that this church used to play, the deception, the lies, really fueled my deconstruction years later. Let alone all of the lies that were told to us as teenagers, to stay away from sex, that sex was dirty, that sex was a sin, that we were not properly given training to be sexually active adults. I laugh at that because all the teenagers, except for me, I guess I was the only teenager in my youth group who was not sexually active, but all the teenagers in my youth group were sexually active and were not equipped to be sexually active. So several of the girls did get pregnant in my teenage youth group. And even though we were on fire youth group, those kids were having sex, and they were having sex without telling their parents. This is what I have to deal with nowadays. I used to be a medical assistant for a nonprofit clinic for teens without insurance, and teenagers have sex all the time. Each and every teenager that would walk into that clinic were sexually active, and they were not telling their parents. And it was my illegal obligation to treat those kids and to encourage them to have safe sex practices, and to provide condoms and give them safe sex education, whatever safe sex education their parents had not provided. Now, this is what I do as well in clinic today as an adult. There's plenty of adults who have little to no knowledge of safe sex practices because they had come out of religion. Now, I couldn't tell you how happy I am today after leaving evangelical church and having come through my deconstruction. Now, my deconstruction is nothing new. Again, it's happened over a long period of time, but it's given me that time to reflect. Who am I? What do I believe? And who do I want to be going forward? And of course, it's not to be an evangelical Christian, me analyzing it, both the scripture itself on the surface and the historicity of the Bible and the straight actions of people who are Christian nowadays on how they act and how they treat people and how they've, started an insurrection in our country, gives me pause, gives me a lot of pause. By the way, when I did my deconstruction video a year ago, I did it with my peach tree behind me, but this time, I have my fig tree behind me because I wanted to do a quick analogy of who I am and how I feel about myself in the Christian church. Now, if any of you know your Bible and you've read Mark, you would remember the story of Jesus cursing a fig tree. Now, it's funny because the fig tree was laid in like the next scripture after he curses the fig tree. The fig tree is said to be out of season anyway, so it wasn't even the season for figs. There weren't going to be any fruit on that tree for like months, right? So he curses it anyway. Now, I've heard this sermon over and over again when it comes to this fig tree. Whether the fig tree represents Jerusalem, whether the fig tree represents the destruction of the temple. I've heard pastors use the fig tree in regards to the end times, that the fig tree are the believers in Christ who bore no fruit, and those ones will be judged and they will be sent to hell. I've heard many, many different analogies to that fig tree parable and that fig tree story. And the funny thing is, did the writer of Mark know that there are some fig trees that are generational fig trees? There are some fig trees that will bear fruit for years, and that those figs won't be ripened for a very, very long time, and for a whole bunch of different reasons. Sometimes the fig tree doesn't have enough nutrients for the figs to ripen. Sometimes the fig tree doesn't have enough moisture or water for figs to ripen. Sometimes fig trees aren't generational trees. They will bear fruit for a good 5 to 6 years, but for that 5 to 6 years, that those figs will not ripen, not yet, not until they're a little bit older. Now, why am I using this as an example? Very much, that fig tree is me. So, my fig tree, when we bought this house, the original owner of this house said he's done everything he can to get these figs to ripen. They will not ripen. He's done everything he possibly can. Same with me. I've done like food, fertilizer, extra water. We even clipped back the fig tree in order to see if we could shock it into making it ripen. And even now, the figs aren't quite ripe. They're all soft, but they won't ripen. They won't turn purple. I don't know why that is, but this is how I feel. I feel, as when it comes to my deconstruction, I am that fig tree. I am that fig tree that keeps bearing fruit, even though that fruit isn't quite ready yet. Year after year, as an evangelical Christian, all of my gifts came out of me. And I'm not talking about spiritual gifts. I'm talking about my gifts of the arts, my gifts of music, my gifts of helping others. That stuff came out of me, out of Christian church, and I'm very happy. It's not like I wasn't one of those Christians who never did anything, who never helped people, who never got involved. I was very much all of those things. So as far as my fruits as a Christian, those came out, but they never really ripened. They never really became, I never really became a pastor, a full pastor. I never really became super involved in the church to where it was my full-on life career. And I am incredibly, incredibly thankful for that. Because again, I am that tree. I am that tree whose fruit isn't quite ripe yet. I'm not quite ready yet. And over the years, I've become different people, and I've done different careers and done different things. And I've explored different religions and how people live in their lives and different lifestyles. And I've learned that all of those different hats that I've worn in life, they were all me. Each and every different person that I've interacted with, each and every different career that I've interacted with, each and every one of those hats were all just a different part of my entire self. And who I will be in the future isn't quite ready yet. And just like the tree, I just have to be patient and wait until my fruit is ready to ripen. And even though I've borne fruit, I've done great things over the years, There may be even more to come, and Christianity is not a part of that, and that makes me all the more happy. So, the World Health Organization has an ambitious goal to end HIV as a worldwide pandemic by the year 2030. Do we have the technology to make that happen? You better believe we do. We have drugs that can prevent from ever catching HIV in the first place. And the treatments for HIV now are incredibly simple and incredibly effective. We have the technology to end HIV. Do we have the educational systems in society to make that known so it'll be readily available to everybody who might want it? Probably not. We probably will not make the goal to end HIV by the year 2030, but I see no reason why we can't make it by the year 2035 or by 2040. That being said, that is my goal for the next couple of decades, to stay in HIV. Why? Well, when I was a child, HIV was a death sentence. If you caught HIV, you would die. Now, that is not the case with HIV. Also, the Christian right used HIV as an excuse to say this is some sort of will from God to kill homosexuals. Well, the fastest rising number of people who are dying from HIV or catching HIV are heterosexual women of color who are black and brown. Now, why would God do that? Why would he hurt nice, happy heterosexual couples with such a horrible, devastating disease? Now, again, this horrible, devastating disease is very much treatable nowadays, but the Christian right don't know anything about that because they know little to nothing about medicine or education or honestly helping their fellow man. Now, I'm going to end with saying a happy congratulations that Pat Robertson has passed away. He is a prime example of evangelical Christians knowing absolutely nothing about science, absolutely nothing about society, absolutely nothing about medicine, absolutely nothing about being a counselor whatsoever. And he has passed away, and I can't tell you how incredibly happy I am that his poisonous lies can no longer hurt my generation or the generations coming after me. Pat Robertson, he's quoted as saying many, many wacky things, but I remember him saying that 9/11 was caused by gay people, which is incredible because I don't remember anything about the terrorists that attacked the World Trade Center being homosexual whatsoever. Of course, he would use it to attack the religion of Islam, but his excuse for that is that homosexual sin in America was causing terrorism. Of course, he's also said that homosexual sin in America was causing storms and tornadoes, and I believe the earthquake in Haiti. He believed that the practice of voodoo in Haiti was the cause of the earthquakes in Haiti. He believes that homosexuals just existing, just being alive, controls the weather, and that God will punish us, the entire United States, by the way, with bad weather because of homosexual activity. Completely, utterly ridiculous, superstitious, and just downright insane, nutter-butter wackiness. I'm glad that man is gone. And I do take comfort in these statistics. Now, I shared these on my last deconstruction video. I'm happy to share them again. 20 years ago, the average age of an evangelical was 35 years old. Now, in the present day, the average age of an evangelical is 55 years old. It doesn't take a mathematician to understand what's going on and what's happening with this trend. Evangelicals are aging out. Their children are no longer believing in the religion as they are growing up. Their numbers are not growing. Their numbers are shrinking. And statistically, I believe by the year 2050, there will be more non-religious believing people in America than there will be faith-believing people in America. This is just because the young no longer are believing in the religions of their parents. And why should they? We live in an information age. We live in an age where you can verify everything over your phone if you know how to do proper research, if you're an inquiring mind. If you are not somebody who is stuck in a cult and just believes what your pastor says, you could always look it up. But the thing is, hopefully I will live long enough to see evangelical Christianity die. The only thing that I find isn't more comforting is that it's not dying fast enough, but it will die. Of course, religion is like a hydra from Greek mythology. You cut the head off, another head will grow up in its place. I don't think this is the end of Christianity whatsoever. Look at the Catholic Church. They've remodeled and refashioned themselves throughout the ages, and they're incredibly rich. So Christianity is not going anywhere for at least another couple centuries. But as science gains, more and more people will gravitate towards scientific explanations for the world that we live in and fall away from superstition and fall away from church tradition. I'm very happy that I'm a deconstructed Christian. I'm very happy that I've embraced science and reason over superstition and church tradition. Why do I make the videos? I just wanted to share my experience in evangelical church and to let people know, if you too are going through deconstruction, you are not alone. I always say that I'm an ex-evangelical worship pastor, and it's funny because I'm not alone. If you look at a lot of the videos out there from skeptics and atheists and agnostics, a lot of them used to be worship pastors. They used to be people who would lead people into worship with their music, and I was one of those too. I just want to say, for everybody out there who's going through deconstruction, you are not alone. Challenge yourself. Challenge the people in your life who are believers. Let them know. Do research. Give them a good reason why you don't believe in God anymore. Give them those reasons, and don't beat them up with it. Understand that they're still indoctrinated into a religion that they can't verify in reality. It's inconsistent with reality and recorded history. They're believing in faith, and once you believe in faith, it's got to take a lot to stop believing in faith, even if you show them all the facts and figures right in front of their face. Hugs, health, happiness from Las Vegas. Stay strong, and I will see you again.